Movies that change the movies. That's the subject of this special episode of Ebert Presents at the Movies. Hi, I'm Christy Lemire of the Associated Press.
And I'm Ignacy Vishnevetsky of Movie.com. We're taking a look back at some landmark movies and a landmark show from our vault. Let's go back to 1979 for a vintage sneak previews.
Will you listen to me? That meteor is 5 miles wide, and it's definitely going to hit us.
That porthole's going to go at any moment. We got to find another way out of here, and right now.
If you have a Schuss, we'll end up with a missile in our laps.
That altitude, you can't breathe, so unless they get on oxygen in 45 seconds, it's goodbye.
They're all disaster films, but the one at the end, Airport, is the one that started it all. It wasn't a great movie, but Airport was one of the single most influential films of the 70s. Why? Because it triggered the most popular movie form of the 70s, the disaster film. Airport's a landmark film, a movie that changed the movies, and landmark films like Airport are the subject we'll be exploring this time on Sneak Previews Take 2, one of those special change of pace shows where Roger and I take a closer look at trends and issues in the movies. This is Roger Ebert, film critic of the Chicago Sun-Times.
And this is Gene Siskel of the Chicago Tribune. On this show, we're going to talk about recent movies that changed the movie business. Now, maybe for the better and maybe for the worse, these movies still have a major impact on the movies we see today. What was the one thing they all had in common? They were all big hits, and they were all unexpected moneymakers, and their successes, that created big new trends. We'll take a look at Easy Rider, the first anti-establishment, low-budget youth film. At Vixen, the first sex film to break through to middle America. At Sweetback, the first of the new wave of angry black films. At Jaws, the big hit that inspired the movie industry to devote every summer to scaring the hell out of us. And at movies like Beyond and Back that have changed the ways movies are sold to the public. And now Gene starts with the movie we have to thank for 10 long years of disaster epics.
Do we have to thank it?
I think so, yes.
Okay. A case can be made that Airport is the most influential and representative movies of the 70s. It was the first disaster film of the decade, and its whole appeal was that for $3 we could experience the terror of an impending plane crash while safely ensconced in a movie theater seat.
They need you? No, not yet. It won't be ready to drive out for a half hour. Ingram knows what to do in the meantime. Okay, so we know the kook is sitting at 23A. Not here.
That's right. And what's your opinion?
My opinion is they should get the hell back here as fast as they can.
Well, if he should let it go, is there any chance that the plane could stand the explosion?
Well, we got one break. He's not sitting in an aisle seat. So, first, it'll blow out a hunk of the fuselage right here.
And what kind of structural damage would that cause?
Luckily, there's nothing but skin on the sides. All the control cables run along here, so it's not too big a hole. She might still fly. But the sudden decompression at 30,000 feet is something you gotta see to believe.
He'll get sucked out, won't he?
And so will anybody sitting next to him. Until that pressure equalizes, everything within 20 feet of him that's not nailed down or strapped in is gonna get sucked right out that hole.
Takes about 3 seconds, doesn't it?
3, 4, 5, depends on the size of the hole. Everything fogs up just like that. And then watch out. That altitude, you can't breathe.
I like that. First they whet our appetites with the model, then we hope they give us the real people. Now, besides triggering all the disaster pictures that followed, Airport was influential in one other way. In 1970, before Airport came out, Hollywood was on a youth kick, making lots of pictures with young themes and young stars, typically rebelling against things old. But the surprising, overwhelming success of Airport, an old-fashioned picture with old-fashioned stars, reminded Hollywood that adults raised on pictures of the 30s and 40s would flock to see movies that were old-fashioned, rousing entertainments, and Airport was precisely that.
It was. It was almost like they took Grand Hotel out of the vault, dusted it off, and put wings on it. The disaster formula was always the same. What went up had to come down. Unless it was already down, in that case it had to go up. And smoke, flame, fire, explosions, or at least very high winds. We got 3 more Airport movies. Airport 75, Airport 77, and not to forget the Concorde, Airport 79, plus the Towering Inferno. hurricane, earthquake, the Poseidon Adventure, the last thing we needed, Beyond the Poseidon Adventure. And now the latest disaster picture, Meteor. Can Mudslide be far behind?
I hope not. I think that people are really interested in why the 70s was the disaster film decade. Maybe it had to do with what was going on in society in the beginning of the decade. We had lots of rotten things going on. There was Watergate, there was unemployment and inflation, and also the war in Vietnam. We felt bad about that. We thought maybe disaster was coming upon us. The disaster film gave us a chance to experience that disaster, but at a very safe distance. Other people would get killed. We always survived.
I like what you said earlier about the older people going to this movie. As a matter of fact, they went in and they were reassured by something else, too. They were reassured by the form of this movie, by the story of this movie, by the way the movie looked. They had seen this movie before in the 30s. It was like the old-fashioned movies they used to go to. The kids had all the Campus in Flames, Kill the Pigs movies. They had nothing to go to. They go and they even recognize the stars. It's Helen Hayes, it's Van Heflin, they're right at home.
Yeah, the good guys win, the bad guys lose. I'll tell you another group that was really in love with this picture, theater owners. I happened to see Airport in 1970 in a theater full of theater owners. They applauded at the end of the movie. They not only liked the movie, they liked what it was going to do with their box office.
They were applauding visions of their bank accounts.
And not only just visions of the bank accounts, it went bigger. And this is the key to all of these pictures that we're going to be talking about. They were not just hits. They were unexpected, tremendously big hits.
Let's talk about another influential movie that started more movies, too. In the old days of Hollywood, Easy Rider would have been considered a B movie, one of those throwaway little pictures fighting it out at the bottom of the heap with the Bowery Boys. Gidget Goes Hawaiian. Easy Rider was the first B picture to make big money like a major motion picture. It only cost about $400,000 to make, and it earned $40 million at the box office. The astounding success of Easy Rider was based on an anti-establishment message. Young people stood in line to see second-string stars like Peter Fonda, Dennis Hopper, at that time Jack Nicholson, on a cross-country motorcycle odyssey through the small towns of America.
If the sun refuses to shine, I don't mind. I don't mind.
Later that night around a campfire, they realized they found out things they didn't want to know. And the disillusioned kids in the audience knew exactly how they felt.
This used to be a hell of a good country. I can't understand what's going on with it.
Man, everybody got chicken, that's what happened. Hey, we can't even get into, like, a second-rate hotel. I mean, a second-rate motel, you dig? They think we're going to cut their throat or something, man. Like, they're scared, man.
Oh, they're not scared of you. They're scared of what you represent to them.
Hey, man. All we represent to them, man, is somebody who needs a haircut.
Oh, no. What you represent to them is freedom.
What the hell's wrong with freedom, man? That's what it's all about.
Oh, yeah, that's right. That's what it's all about, all right. Of course, don't ever tell anybody that they're not free, because then they're going to get real busy killing and maiming to prove to you that they are. Oh, yeah, they're going to talk to you and talk to you and talk to you about individual freedom. But they see a free individual, it's going to scare them.
No, well, don't make them run 'em scared.
No. It makes them dangerous.
That movie came out in the fall of 1969. They're talking about the war in that scene. They're talking about the generation gap. Two things the kids in the audience were glad to hear somebody finally talking about at last. Now, scenes like that had a visceral appeal for young audiences. The movie made a fortune. And the way the story goes, half the producers in Hollywood sent their nephews up into the desert with a camera and a motorcycle trying to duplicate Easy Rider's unstudied formula of dope and doom. Easy Rider looks a little dated now with its hippie hairstyles and its love beads, but it inspired a revolution in the movie business that's still going on.
Boy, when you said generation gap, you're right. This is a film that sort of waved a flag over the generation gap. Immediately, we got whole bunches of youth pictures talking to young people. And also, and this is very important, a lot of people may not realize, but the guy who directed that movie, wrote and directed it, is Dennis Hopper, the guy who was wearing the hat and looked like Buffalo Bill in that picture. Now, can you imagine the shock among people in the movie business when they saw that this guy, looking like that, looking like a scruffy guy, make a picture that made $40 million? What happened? Suddenly, the heads of the movie studio said, get me people in touch with young people. We've got a bunch of old people making movies. Let's get young people making movies. And so some of our finest filmmakers today, Martin Scorsese with Taxi Driver, Steven Spielberg, Close Encounters, these guys got their chance to make movies because of this very influential film, Easy Rider.
There's another thing. It may not look like it in that scene, but Jack Nicholson is talking there. He plays a member of the Southern establishment. He's a young lawyer. They meet him in a drunk tank. The next morning, they all get out together. He's had enough of that town. It has nothing more for him. The next shot you have, you see him on the back of one of their motorcycles. He's still dressed in his business suit. He has a football helmet on. He's lighting out for the territory. It was great for the audience. The establishment, at last, had cut in with them.
So it was a victory for young people. Easy Rider, a film that gave us young films and young filmmakers.
Right.
Now, our next influential film came as a shock to both the people who saw it and to the people who only heard about it. It's Sweetback's Badass Song, which was the first of the so-called angry black films of the 70s. This was no namby-pamby 50s or 60s Hollywood story about blacks and whites living nicely together. This was a blistering story about one black man, a man named Sweetback, who all by himself violently takes on the white establishment, represented by white cops, and Sweetback's fury really connected with the unspoken fury of its audience. Tough stuff, one man winning. In 1971, that picture was social dynamite. It was a lightning rod for the frustrations of many blacks who had seen, sure, a gorgeous Sidney Poitier on the screen, but they had never seen rough black anger in a movie. Black audiences were startled by Sweetback's anger, and they were thrilled by it. A cheap film to make, Sweetback made millions in just a few weeks. And then it mysteriously disappeared. It was followed by less tough, but still quite angry black films like Superfly, Shaft, and the Jim Brown and Fred Williamson's pictures, and the tough black women's films starring Pam Grier.
You know, I was thinking when you were mentioning that, 10 years earlier, in 1962, a movie came out starring Poitier called Lilies of the Field. And he helped some white nuns build a church. And I think the patronizing white attitude was, gee, it must be great for the blacks to see one of their own helping those white nuns build a church, right? Well, 10 years later, in my opinion, it must have been great for the blacks to see one of their own helping himself.
I think the key to the success of this film is that an audience was getting the films it hadn't gotten before. Now, that's a theme that runs through all the three pictures we've talked about.
It does, you know.
Airport, older people getting an old-fashioned film. Easy Rider, young people getting a youth film. Black people now in Sweetback getting a current hip black film. Disenfranchised audiences getting the films that they wanted.
You know, you're exactly right. That is the only thing these films have in common. It doesn't matter if one of them is good, one of them is bad, one's expensive, one's cheap, one has stars, one doesn't. The people who went into the theaters to see these films sat there in amazement and looked at the screen and said, that's right, and I've never seen that in a movie before. And in a way, you know, that's true of this one, too, the next one we have. Before a movie named Jaws came out in the summer of 1975, the major studios had a more or less standard strategy for when they opened their movies. They brought out their so-called major motion pictures in the fall, the winter, and the spring. When the hot weather struck, the big guys went on vacation. They let the small producers move in with summer schlock like Beach Blanket Bingo. But then the producers of Jaws wondered what would happen if you let summer movie audiences go first class with an expensive and stylishly made thriller.
This is a great white, Larry, a big one. And any shark expert in the world will tell you it's a killer, it's a man-eater.
Look, the situation is that apparently a great white shark has staked a claim in the waters off Amity Island. And he is going to continue to feed here as long as there is food in the water.
And there's no limit to what he's going to do. I mean, we've already had 3 incidents. 2 people killed inside of a week, and it's going to happen again. It happened before. The Jersey Beach.
1916, there were 5
people chewed up in the surf.
In 1 week.
Tell them about the swimmers.
A shark is attracted to the exact kind of splashing and activity that occurs whenever human beings go in swimming. You cannot avoid it.
If you open the beaches on the 4th of July, it's like ringing the dinner bell, for Christ's sake.
Look, Mr. Vaughn, I pulled a tooth the size of a shot glass out of the wrecked hull of a boat out there, and it was the tooth of a great white.
In that case, there must be a pretty big great white out there. It was really very simple. Jaws was a magnificent machine for scaring us silly, and every time the shark attacked, Millions of summertime moviegoers screamed and they levitated out of their seats, and Jaws actually surpassed Gone with the Wind to become the all-time box office champion. It took in eventually $215 million. And the movie industry observed, it computed, it learned, and there hasn't been a summer since without a lot of big-budget productions set up to scare us out of our wits every 5 minutes. Now, last summer alone, we got Alien, the Amityville Horror, and Prophecy, and eventually we can probably look forward to Jaws 3, and Jaws 4, and Jaws Forevermore.
You're right. Jaws, scary films every summer. There are more theaters available for the summer. That's why so much business is done. The drive-ins are open. Who goes to the drive-in? Kids. Kids love to be scared, and horror films are great pictures to make out in. You can grab the woman or man you're with. Also, there's one other reason why Jaws was so influential and so easily imitated. Because it was easy to be imitated. I think horror films are probably the easiest kinds of pictures to make. The formula's simple. Show somebody afraid, show the monster that they're afraid of, show the monster attacking them. It's as easy as a pie. A comedy is much tougher to do, for example.
You know, it occurs to me when you were saying that, that's another comedy nominator of all of these influential pictures. They were easy to imitate. Now, 12 years ago, Stanley Kubrick made a picture called 2001. Everybody loved it. It was not immediately influential because nobody could figure out how to duplicate it. When they finally did, they made Star Wars. But these other pictures, you don't have to be a genius.
Now, by the late 60s, our next influential film would come around. With this widespread popularity of Playboy magazine, what happened was that checking out the Playmate of the Month was routine for millions of Americans. In the movie business, what was going on in the sex area was that there was a film that triggered a similar mainstream acceptance of erotic material. That picture was Vixen, a low-budget sex comedy that made a fortune. Russ Meyer was the writer, producer, editor, and director of Vixen, about an aggressive woman who simply liked to have a good time with men.
Baby, you're so impatient.
It's been a long day.
I like it when you're impatient. We'll have a long night.
Come over here.
Shall I undress? Or will you do it for me?
She seems to be having a terrific time, just as good a time as the guy in the picture, and I think that's the key. Actress Erica Gavin had such an upbeat attitude towards sex in Vixen that it seemed like a fairly clean picture, especially compared to most people's idea of a nudie film back in 1969. This wasn't a picture starring dirty old men wearing black socks. The people in Vixen were healthy, athletic, and funny. And that cheerful attitude towards sex brought couples to see Vixen. It was a huge hit. And what followed were hundreds of skin flicks, some that imitated Vixen's humor and some that were just more vulgar and explicit.
I think your key word there was couples.
Yeah.
Before Vixen, you think of a line in front of a skin flick, and who do you see? You see lonely old men, you see horny college students, you see guys with raincoats. After Vixen, you begin to see women in that line. It was okay for women to go and see an X-rated movie. They could go and see it without being ridden out of town on a rail.
This was the film that created the industry of sex films for middle America, because also what you saw in this picture, going to the picture, were businessmen. Vixen was 68 minutes long, I think, perfect for a businessman's lunch. The film cost $73,000 to make, and it grossed $8 million, a big hit.
And there's another thing, I think. If you think about our two criteria for what makes an influential film, this certainly met most of them, or both of them. People went to the theater and they say, I haven't seen that on the screen before, and in most cases they said, yes, I am happy to see it. And secondly, it certainly was easy to imitate. And I think that that's also true of the next film, that it's easy to imitate, but unfortunately it doesn't take care of our first criteria. It didn't show people what they hadn't seen in the movies before and what they wanted to see, but the ads told them that they would. Our next influential film is part of a trend that today is influencing the way movies are sold to you. It's the movie Beyond and Back, which was sold to the public with a high-pressure, hard-sell, massive TV campaign. And for the movie Beyond and Back, a film with no big-name stars, those high-pressure ads breathlessly told us that Beyond and Back would reveal the secrets of the afterlife.
On August 4th, 1943, Paul Kelly died of pneumonia. He left his body and for a time wandered through the hospital until he was brought back to life. On December 14th, 1964, Anne Fleck died. Suddenly, she was outside her body looking down on the scene below. Later, she could recount in detail events which happened in the room while she was pronounced clinically dead. What happened during the fateful minutes these people spent in the world beyond? Don't miss Beyond and Back.
Well, that was the ad cam fame for Beyond and Back. Did it ring a bell with you? I think I saw it about 25 times myself. But when you walked out of the theater, you felt like a complete sucker because Beyond and Back didn't reveal any secrets of the afterlife. It didn't even reveal any secrets of this life. It was about people who fell into comas and came out of them again, and they were all actors anyway. All you remembered were the ads. Well, what happened was that your town was blitzed by an overkill media campaign. Fast buck distributors moved in like the carnival operators of old. They rented a lot of theaters all at once, and they spent thousands of dollars on a huge advertising campaign. And suddenly it was everywhere. A movie you'd never heard of before, and a subject that sounded like it belonged on the front page of the National Enquirer. Well, pictures like Beyond and Back are complete trash. They revolutionized the movie industry, okay, in a despicable way. Their ad campaigns enticed whole families into paying to see a worthless movie with money that maybe they can't spare.
It was a worthless movie. I hated it. All you'd talk to are people who had been out for maybe 15 minutes or a couple hours. I wanted this movie to tell me about somebody who'd been dead for a year and came back.
You love good movies, and I love good movies.
Yeah.
It makes us feel good when people go to see a movie and they say, hey, I had a good time, I'm glad I went to the theater. These movies practically force people into the theaters with psychological warfare. The kids are there in front of the set on Saturday morning. They're hectoring their parents all day. I want to see Beyond and Back, or Chariot of the Gods, or Noah's Ark. That was a great one. In Search of Noah's Ark, remember that?
Wilderness Family is
right,
another
in
one.
the Search of a Noah's Ark, at the end of the movie, they were still searching for the Ark. Well, the fact of the matter is, these movies, when people come out of the theaters, they feel burnt. They've spent $5, $10, $15, $20 to see these movies. Those people aren't going to go to a movie again very soon.
Here's another bad effect. Major studios saw how much money is being made from these pictures. They think you can sell anything. There was a killer baby picture that opened in 50 theaters in one town. The bad movies like this, hyper ad campaigns, and you pay for those ad campaigns. What happens is the admission price is jacked up at your neighborhood theater, $50. You get suckered once going in, you get suckered in the theater, and all these bad movies in all these theaters crowd out the good movies. These are the most hateful films that you and I regularly want to cross.
Absolutely.
We'd like to get rid of them.
Wait a minute, Gene. I think we have somebody else here. It looks to me like Spot the Wonder Dog leaping into the balcony to sniff out and destroy bad film.
Now, what's Spot doing on this show? Well, in our search for influential films, Spot's come up with the one film that's responsible for a lot of the rotten movies we regularly label Dogs of the Week on our regular sneak preview show. This granddaddy of dogs is Five Fingers of Death, which back in 1973 was the very first karate film ever released in the United States. The film was cheap, but its form of violence was fresh. Would you believe? Flying feet, trampoline somersaults, and powerful magic fingers that glow red. Violent and dumb, but funny and entertaining. The leading actor there was the good guy Lo Lee, no relation to Bruce Lee, who later brought a lot of class to karate pictures. But after Bruce Lee died, the Schlockmeisters once again took over the karate film market, giving us Bruce Lee's cousin, sister, uncle look-alike in sloppily dubbed, horribly edited grunt and groan pictures.
Okay, so Kung Fu fans have seen 100 of these rip-offs. Why do they keep going back? I think it's because they had such a shock of delight with the life in those original Bruce Lee pictures that they keep hoping against hope that Bruce Lee will somehow come back.
All right, now let's recap our influential movies show.
Good.
I think that I have a prediction about what's the film that's out now, it's been out for a while, is going to be the next film to start a big trend in movies. I think the film is Warren Beatty's Heaven Can Wait, and it satisfies a lot of our criteria for influential movies. Number one, it made a lot of money unexpectedly. It was a remake of an old picture, and it did very well. Remakes don't often do that well. Number two, and much more important, it was a film that gave people a movie, a kind of a movie, that they hadn't had in a long time.
Okay, then, Gene, number three, too. The third reason is because it's easy to rip off. It's easy to copy. That's what we said was our third point. And what could be easier to copy than romance, than boy meets girl? So that's it for this show.
I can think of two really opposite extreme examples of this. One on the smaller end is Sex, Lies, and Videotape, which gave all kinds of aspiring filmmakers
helped
hope.
Start the indie boom, yeah.
Right, that they could do that too, pick up their camera and go do that too. The other one's Avatar. And I think that made everybody feel like everything should be in 3D now. I mean, that was sort of the snowball that was happening here. You know, biggest money-making film of all time.
Yeah.
everyone wants to make 3D films now, whether they should or not.
If I had to name two really influential films from maybe the last 20 years, I'd say The Idiots by Lars von Trier, which was very controversial at Cannes, but it ended up making unsimulated sex into kind of a cliche of art house movies. Suddenly everybody had to have unsimulated sex, and they had to shoot.
Bus, they're all actually doing it, right?
The brown bunny,
right.
And to shoot on handheld digital video, which kind of also brings me around to the other one, which is, or rather two films, The Bourne Supremacy and The Bourne Ultimatum, which helped make handheld, shaky camera the standard of action movies, thrillers,
everything
spy
Paul
movies.
Greengrass does, you have to be immersed in all of that.